Ready for a spine-tingling experience? These 5 true stories will give you a glimpse into the mysteries of the unseen world and leave you questioning what lies beyond our perception.
These 5 true stories.
Imagine driving through a quiet rural road at night. You're alone, or at least you think you are. For most, the supernatural is a campfire tale, a joke. But for a few unlucky souls, it's not just real. It's following them home. Tonight, we step into 5 unsettling real-life encounters with the unexplained. So, settle in and listen closely. Story 1. Beyond the Veil. The wooden thing that followed. I don't remember the last part of the funeral. I remember the hymns and the dull weight of my suit clinging to me like regret. But not the part where they lowered the coffin into the ground. I must have left before then, or maybe I stayed. Honestly, I was on autopilot by the time they brought out the coffee in the church basement. What I do remember is the drive. I'd been behind the wheel for almost 6 hours by then, trying to make it home in one stretch. Couldn't afford another night in a motel. Gas station coffee, caffeine pills, and grief had kept me upright, but just barely. It was 3:08 a.m. when I took the left turn onto County Road 47, a shortcut through the Pine Barrens I'd taken a dozen times before. But that night, it didn't feel like a shortcut. It felt like a dare. The trees leaned in too close. Their outlines looked carved from graphite instead of wood, tall and stiff and absolutely black against the already black sky. My headlights cut through the dark like a scalpel, but the beams barely touched anything before the void swallowed them up again. There was no wind, no wildlife, no radio. I'd lost signal somewhere past the last mile marker, and the silence pressing in on me felt intelligent, like something was listening, waiting. Then I saw it. About 50 yards ahead, dead center in the road, stood a wooden sawhorse. One of those old-school kinds, splintered at the edges, gray from weather and time, but someone had done something strange to it. Hung from the crossbeam, swaying gently in the motionless air, was a plastic baby bottle. It glinted white in my high beams, the kind of white that doesn't belong in the middle of a road at 3 a.m. I lifted my foot off the gas and coasted, my tires crunching against the loose gravel at the edge of the pavement. No roadwork signs, no cones, no equipment, just the sawhorse and that bottle dangling like a lure. As I crept closer, I could see that the bottle was empty, bone dry. But it caught the light in a strange way, like there was something still inside. Or maybe it was just the plastic sweating from the cold. My stomach twisted, sudden and irrational. I told myself it was just hunger, gas station jerky and nerves. I nudged the wheel slightly to the left, prepared to drive around it like I'd done with 100 fallen branches or forgotten toolboxes on back roads before. But something told me to look. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was some cruel urge in my own brain. But as my car passed the sawhorse, I glanced up into the rear-view mirror, and it was moving, not just fallen over or shifting in the breeze. It was walking. Number. That's not quite right. It was unfolding. The legs of the sawhorse, those dull wooden beams, split and extended downward with unnatural precision, like spider limbs made from timber and steel pins. The entire frame lifted itself from the road and began to stride after me with mechanical exactness. Each step covered too much distance, each motion too smooth, too synchronized. And the bottle, the baby bottle, it swayed with every movement. Not randomly, not from gravity, but in rhythm, like a metronome, like a heartbeat, like it was watching me. I slammed on the gas. The engine groaned and surged. 40, 50, 60. In the mirror, the thing kept pace. Exactly 20 feet behind my rear bumper, 70, 80. The yellow center lines blurred into one continuous smear of paint under my wheels. Trees whipped past, my hands locked on the wheel so tight I lost feeling in my knuckles. Still there, still walking. That goddamn wooden frame, somehow animated, somehow alive, and never falling behind. Its joints clicked in time with the engine. Tick, 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 like it was counting, like it was learning. I wanted to believe it was fatigue, hallucination. I just buried my sister. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But when I took the next bend in the road, something inside me knew. If I stopped driving, it wouldn't stop walking. It was coming for me. And the bottle? It wasn't empty anymore. I kept driving. Not because I thought I could outrun it. I already knew I couldn't. But because I didn't know what else to do. My hands were locked on the wheel. My eyes flicking constantly between the narrow road ahead and the mirror behind me. And every time I looked, it was still there. 20 feet back, no more, no less. The sawhorse walked without sound, but the baby bottle, tick, 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 a soft rhythmic clatter, like plastic tapping gently against wood or bone. The sound burrowed into my ears, past the hum of the engine, past the rushing wind, past the rational part of my brain that was still trying to come up with a less insane explanation for what I was seeing. It was the only consistent thing in that void. That ticking, as steady as a watch, as cold as the hour. And I think that's when I remembered her. Sarah. She was 3 years older than me. Always the braver one. The one who climbed trees too high and made forts out of garbage and carved little people out of driftwood with Dad's pocket knife. She was the kind of girl who didn't mind bleeding. We used to play in these woods, back when the trees seemed less like walls and more like gates to some secret kingdom. We'd build traps, make up stories about ghost coyotes and forest witches, and pretend the birds were spies for something older than God. Sarah had a thing for dolls. Not store-bought ones. Those creeped her out, she said. She made her own. Little hunched wooden things with thread limbs and mismatched button eyes. Ugly things, if I'm being honest. But she loved them. One of them, the one she called Mr. Horse, she'd made from an old sawhorse leg Dad left in the shed. She'd carved a smile into it, glued on strands of twine for hair. Said it was the fastest doll alive. She'd pretend it followed her around. Said it waited outside her window when she went to sleep. I laughed at her back then. Teased her, even. Told her the thing looked like it had rabies. She didn't talk to me for a week. I think that was the same summer the fire started. I don't remember if Mr. Horse survived, but I remembered him now. Remembered that smile, carved wide and uneven, like the wood was screaming, but forgot how. I risked another glance in the rearview mirror. The thing was still 20 feet back, unfolded and striding, its legs clicking into the asphalt like they belonged there. The baby bottle bounced gently against the crossbeam with every impossible step. Tick, tick, tick. I pressed the gas. 90 miles an hour. My car shook like it was going to rattle apart. The trees blurred. I could barely breathe, still 20 feet back. I took my foot off the gas, heart hammering, and coasted. 80, 70, 60. Still there, still 20 feet. I slammed on the brakes. My tires screeched. The car fishtailed slightly before stopping dead in the center of the road. My hazard lights blinked to life, casting orange glows across the trees. I stared into the rearview mirror, barely blinking. The thing stopped too. No screeching, no stumble, just stillness. It stood there, 20 feet away, as if frozen mid-stride. The wooden legs were bent slightly, one forward, one back, as if it had been caught. The baby bottle hung perfectly still. And that's when I realized. It wasn't wind that moved it. It wasn't gravity. That bottle had been moving with intent. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, engine idling, hazards blinking, everything else perfectly still. No animals, no bugs, no signs of life. Just me, the road, and that thing. Finally, I reached for the radio. I needed sound, any sound. I twisted the knob, half expecting static. At first, that's what I got. Then, through the fuzz, a voice. Broken, warped, but unmistakably human. Man in his 30s. Last seen leaving a funeral. Vehicle still running. Authorities suspect fatigue or mental distress. The rest was swallowed by static. My hands went cold. I turned the volume up hard. If seen, do not approach. Caller claimed chased by something wooden. And then silence. Not even static anymore. Just dead air. My mouth was dry. My fingers trembled on the wheel. That was me. That was now. And that thing, still standing, still watching. Hadn't moved a muscle, but I swore to God, the bottle was fuller than before. And maybe darker. The longer I sat there, parked in the dead center of that forest road, hazard lights blinking like a slow heartbeat, the more I began to notice patterns, not in the thing's movements. It hadn't moved, but in everything around it. The way the trees bent slightly inward toward the road, as if bowing. The way the moonlight never quite reached the pavement. And the bottle. The bottle. It wasn't the first time I'd seen it. I don't know how I'd forgotten. I must have been 6, maybe 7, when I had that dream. Sari was standing at the edge of my bed, wearing her yellow pajamas, the ones with the rabbits on the sleeves. She looked pale. Not sick, just drained. She was holding something. It hung from her hand like an offering. A baby bottle. She said, "If I ever die, you have to take this. Okay? Promise me you'll take it when it's full." And then she was gone. I told her about it the next morning, laughing, because I'd been scared. But she didn't laugh. She just blinked and said, "Good, you remembered." I hadn't thought about that dream in over 20 years. And now, here it was, hanging from a wooden frame that looked far too much like the one she'd built in the backyard when we were kids. The one Dad made her take apart after the neighbor's dog cut itself on a nail sticking out the side. I reached for the dome light. I don't know why. Maybe to see myself. Maybe to confirm I was still there. Still real. But when the dome light flicked on, I didn't see my face in the mirror. I didn't see my shadow in the cabin of the car. What I saw, reflected in the rear windshield, was the wooden sawhorse, standing still. Closer now. No longer on the road, but directly behind the car. Centered, like it had always been there. Like it had always belonged in that space where my shadow should have been. I killed the dome light immediately. The car went dark again. But the image stayed burned into my brain. That thing standing in for me, watching me, waiting. My chest was tight. My ribs felt like they were being gripped from the inside. I looked again in the mirror. Nothing. But the bottle. I could still see the bottle, and it was no longer empty. Its once clear body now bulged slightly. the plastic bowing with internal pressure. The liquid inside looked thick, viscous, black, and it pulsed. Not from the road, not from my shaking hands. It pulsed in time with my breathing, in time with my heartbeat. And then I saw it. Something pressed against the inside of the bottle. A tiny flutter, like a ripple beneath the surface, like something alive. My first instinct was to throw the car into reverse, back away from it, run it over if I had to. I shifted, I turned the wheel, and I drove, back the way I came. The road unspooled behind me in flickering light and shadow. I passed the curve I remembered, then the rusted speed limit sign, then the slanted mailbox with the peeling numbers. Good. That meant I was getting close to the county road. Except the next turn brought me back to the same intersection I'd started at. The exact same one. The trees, the cracks in the pavement, the broken guardrail, and the sawhorse. Still standing. Still 20 feet behind me. Still there. I turned the wheel sharply. Took a side path I didn't recognize. Dirt and gravel split up from under the tires. I followed the trail for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30. I don't know. I wasn't thinking anymore. Just fleeing. And yet, the same road, the same bottle, the same distance. No matter how many turns I took, how many exits I tried, I kept ending up back at that intersection. Back at that bottle. Back at him. That's when it hit me. I wasn't driving out anymore. I wasn't even on a road that could be escaped. I was inside something. A loop, a snare, a noose. And the more I resisted, the tighter it drew. Somewhere between the fifth and sixth return to the same intersection, I stopped the car again. Hazard lights, dome light. I looked into the mirror. There was no road anymore behind me. Just the sawhorse and the bottle. It wasn't swinging anymore. It was pointing, slightly angled, like a compass needle. Not random, directed. And I understood, in a way that didn't feel like memory or logic. I understood that it wasn't chasing me anymore. It was waiting. Not for me to die. Not even for me to give up. It was waiting for me to understand. And maybe, just maybe, to accept. Whatever was in that bottle. It wasn't just liquid. It was me. Or what was left of me. And if I didn't take it soon, if I didn't open the door and step outside and reach for it, someone else would. And I might never get it back. I don't remember opening the door. But I must have, because the cold hit me all at once. Wet and sharp, like breath held too long, finally released into the dark. The sawhorse was closer now. I hadn't heard it move, but it was only 10 feet away, maybe less. It stood with unnatural stillness, legs bent in impossible symmetry, like something mid-prayer or mid-hunt. The bottle dangled in front of it, a pendulum of pulsing black, and I stepped forward, one step, then another. My body moved without command, like strings were being pulled from somewhere behind my ribs. My arm rose slowly, elbow locked, fingers trembling as they reached for the bottle. The plastic was warm, too warm, and as my hand closed around it, the bottle shivered, like something inside had been waiting, coiled, and had finally found the skin it recognized. It tilted in my grip, one thick droplet fell. Splack, onto the road, another and another. The black liquid spread in slow rivulets, crawling across the asphalt as if guided by thought. The droplets pooled together, forming vague outlines. A shape. No, not vague. Not anymore. It was a person. A child-sized silhouette in liquid shadow, limbs outstretched. The longer I looked, the clearer it became. It was her. Sarah, or the idea of her. thin and silent, arms wide like she was waiting for me to come closer. The way she used to when I scraped my knees, and she knew better than to offer words. I looked down, and that's when I saw it. My feet were still on the pavement, but they weren't casting a shadow. There was no reflection, no outline beneath me, nothing stretching out behind. Just light passing through me like I wasn't there, or like I wasn't the only one standing here anymore. Then, soft, from nowhere and everywhere, came a voice. You remember me, don't you? Not a whisper, not a threat. It was a child's voice, yes, but it carried weight, resonance, like it had been buried too long under dirt and forgetting. And now it had teeth. It came from the bottle, from the sawhorse, from me. I didn't answer. I didn't know how, but I felt something shift inside my chest. A soft crumpling, like old paper folding in on itself, like a promise being fulfilled. The headlights behind me dimmed. The engine stuttered once, coughed, then kept humming. Still alive, still waiting. I turned back toward the car, except it wasn't empty anymore. In the driver's seat, framed perfectly in the glow of the dash lights, sat the wooden thing, its joints bent just enough to hold the wheel, its head turned ever so slightly toward the road ahead. And the bottle? The bottle hung from the mirror now, swaying gently, back and forth, back and forth. And with each swing, the wheel turned, just slightly, just enough to keep the car centered, to keep it moving, to keep it driving. I stood at the edge of the road and watched the taillights recede into the darkness, red dots shrinking into memory. The ticking faded with them, but I knew I would hear it again, because some hungers don't want to be fed. They just want to be known. And some roads don't take you home. They take you back to where something was left unfinished. Something small, something wooden, and something that never stopped waiting. Some hungers aren't meant to be satisfied. They're meant to remind you that something still isn't done. Story 2. Echoes in the dark, the clay that breathes. I've been working in mines for over a decade, but I've never heard the earth breathe. Not until 3 weeks ago. They sent me down to the lower tunnels of the Black Hollow site. Some old copper mine outside of Cedar Hill that hadn't been touched in 70 years. My job was simple. Mark the new fractures, map the unexplored arms of the system, flag anything that looked unstable. No signal, no team. Just me, a backpack of gear, and my own footsteps echoing through 5 miles of sedimentary silence. At first, it was like every other abandoned shaft I'd surveyed. Stale air, mineral stink, the dry scrape of old rock shifting under pressure. I'd been down there 3 hours when the walls changed. Not the shape, the feeling. The tunnel ahead was narrow and descending, carved by hand, not machine. The marks in the stone weren't from drills or blasting tools. They looked finger-shaped, claw-shaped almost. I stopped to check my position when I switched off my headlamp to recalibrate in the dark. That's when I heard it. A sound, wet, not dripping, not trickling. It was like someone kneading dough or pressing clay between their palms. Rhythmic, patient, biological, and it was coming from just ahead. I called out, half joking, to the dark. Hello? You lost down here too? No answer. Just the breathing sound, slowly growing louder. I flicked my lamp back on and moved forward. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but curiosity, that familiar old liar, kept me moving. The tunnel curved sharply left, then opened into a chamber I hadn't seen on any blueprint. That's where I found it. Standing in the center of the room, lit only by the cone of my headlamp, was me. Clay. But not some crude approximation. Not a statue, not a scarecrow. Me. Down to the rip in my jacket sleeve, the small scar on my left knuckle, the dent in my headlamp casing. Every inch of that figure was an exact replica, sculpted in red clay. And it was breathing. Its chest rose and fell, slow and deliberate. Not air exactly, but movement. Like the whole thing was inflating and deflating. With each exhale, a fine red mist escaped its lips and floated toward me. Tiny motes catching the light, suspended in air thick as syrup. I couldn't move. The clay figure's eyes were closed, but its face was calm, neutral, as if it had just finished shaping me and was waiting to see how I'd react. I took a step back. The clay breathed out again. Dust touched my tongue. It tasted like iron and rain and blood and home. I turned and ran. Didn't look back, didn't shout. Just sprinted, gear slamming against my back, my boots slipping on loose stone. The tunnel stretched longer than I remembered. Every turn twisted wrong. Every echo returned too slowly. But the sound followed me. Step, step, not a chase. Just accompaniment. Like it knew I would run, like it wanted to feel me running. I made it out, I think. But that was 3 days ago. And I still haven't said a word since. Every time I try to speak, the air feels too thick. Like the words are stuck in clay-lined lungs. Like I'm not supposed to use this voice anymore. There's red dust under my nails now. I wash. I scrub. It doesn't go. And last night, when I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, I smiled. But I hadn't meant to. The first morning, I chalked it up to shock. I'd spent the night in my truck, parked just outside the mine entrance. Didn't even remember driving up. My gear was still in the passenger seat, half zipped and crusted with red. I tried to speak into the voice memo app, part of the daily reporting routine, but my throat clenched. Not pain, not panic, just absence. The muscles worked, my lungs inflated, but no sound came out. Not a cough, not a wheeze, just nothing. I didn't feel sick, no fever, no tightness in my chest. But when I spat into the gravel, the saliva came out tinged rust red. It was in me. I drove home that day with the windows cracked open and the heat off, trying to stay grounded. Highway lines blurred under the tires. Radio played static even in full signal range. And I kept thinking about the replica, the breathing version of myself, left behind in that chamber. Why had it looked so calm? Why had I? That night I dreamed in dirt. I was underground, but not in any tunnel I'd recognized. The walls pulsed like lungs. The ceiling dripped warm dust. I walked barefoot. Not by choice, just because I had no shoes. And when I looked down, the prints I left weren't my own. They were too narrow, too perfect, too symmetrical, like they'd been molded. I woke up with my hands half buried in my bed sheets, fingers splayed, pushing down into the mattress like I'd been trying to shape it. There was red dust beneath my nails again, finer than clay, almost soft and warm. I didn't go back to the mine, didn't report the chamber, didn't tell my supervisor what I saw. I told myself it was exhaustion, overwork, chemical exposure, maybe even some weird bacterial spore in the air. But the second night, the dreams returned. This time, I wasn't alone. Something watched me from behind a wall of dripping clay. Its outline looked human, but it never blinked. And its face was mine. Except it smiled constantly, softly, like it had found peace, and was waiting for me to admit I wanted that too. couldn't stop shaking the next morning. I wore gloves all day. At the grocery store, I caught the cashier staring at me. I smiled. She flinched. When I got back into my truck, I checked the mirror. My smile was still there, even though my mouth wasn't moving. Over the next 2 days, I stopped trying to speak. It didn't matter. People barely noticed. When I nodded, they nodded back. When I gestured, they understood. I started to feel lighter, like shedding something heavy. Like I didn't need language anymore. Just intention, just pressure and shape and form. I sat for hours at my kitchen table, palms open, fingers twitching slightly. Clay from a dollar store craft kit in front of me. I didn't remember buying it, but my hands did. They moved on their own. Smooth strokes, delicate pinches, a symmetry I'd never possessed. By sundown, I had made something small, humanoid. Its face was still soft, unfinished. But the shoulders? The scar on the left knuckle? Perfect. I set it gently on the windowsill and fell asleep in the chair. When I woke the next morning, it was breathing. The clay figure on my windowsill was breathing louder now. Still subtle, a slight rise and fall of its chest, but unmistakable. I held my hand above it once, just to feel. It exhaled warm air in tiny puffs that smelled like dry earth after lightning. I didn't make a sound. I couldn't. Even if I wanted to scream, I tried to destroy it. That was my last real act of resistance. I grabbed it by the torso, dragged it from the windowsill to the kitchen sink, and smashed it under the faucet. The water ran red. It broke apart easily, soft like skin. But each piece seemed to pulse in my hands like a dying animal. When I scooped it into a trash bag, I could feel its warmth through the plastic. It throbbed, one last time, as I tied the knot shut. But that night, it was back, whole, and sleeping in my bed. I don't know how long I stood there in the doorway, watching myself breathe. But at some point I blinked. And when I opened my eyes, I was no longer standing. I was in the bed, lying on my side, hands folded neatly across my chest. And the me that had been watching? Gone. Or maybe not gone, just moved, shifted into the skin that had always been waiting. I stopped sleeping after that. Or maybe I never really wake up anymore. I started noticing things that didn't make sense, but in ways that felt correct. Like how my house smelled like soil in the mornings, no matter how many windows I opened, or how my clothes never quite fit the same from one day to the next. Too tight in the shoulders, too loose around the neck. Or how I'd find thin streaks of red dust on my pillow, shaped like fingerprints, shaped like my fingerprints. The neighbors grew quiet, even the ones who used to wave. I caught one of them staring once, a boy, maybe 10 or 11, as I watered the plants that were now growing from cracks in my driveway. He didn't flinch when I looked back. He just said soft and flat, "You're not the one who moved in." And then he walked away. I watched the red dust trail behind him for almost a block. The clay figure returned again, this time larger. It stood in my hallway one morning, in front of the bathroom mirror, facing away from me, naked, head tilted, and perfectly still, except its shoulder moved. My shoulder moved. When I raised my hand, so did it. When I touched my face, its clay fingers mirrored the motion. Half a second too late, I ran out the front door, into the yard, into the street. I didn't stop until I hit the trees at the edge of town. But no matter how far I ran, the smell followed, and the dust. It clung to the insides of my boots, coated the backs of my teeth, gathered behind my ears, in the creases of my eyes, under my fingernails. Even now, when I claw at my own skin, it comes off in flakes that feel malleable, like I'm being reshaped from the inside. And the worst part? The figure isn't following me anymore. It doesn't need to, because every time I pass a window, I see it becoming me. Smoother, more confident. It blinks now. It walks like I used to walk. Like a man who thought he still had time. The dreams are louder. Last night, I walked the same tunnel again. But this time I wasn't alone. I saw them, others, half-formed people, skin like fired clay, faces like echoes. They crouched in the walls, embedded in the dirt, whispering through motionless mouths. One of them looked up at me. Its lips didn't move, but inside my skull I heard, "You can't leave what remembers you." And then it smiled. I woke with my mouth full of red grit, my tongue numb, my breath slow, measured, like something else was pacing me from inside, like it was helping me practice. It's been 3 days since I tried to speak, and I no longer care that I can't. The silence fits better now. It moves through me easier than words ever did. I don't even try to mouth sounds anymore. Only shapes. Shapes my hands understand better than my tongue ever could. There's dust on everything in the house now. A soft red layer like old velvet. It settles in the corners, along the baseboards, inside my shoes. I sweep it every morning, but by nightfall, it returns, always more. Always finer, like it's coming from me. And maybe it is. I tried to call someone yesterday. Held the phone to my ear. Dialed a number I half remembered. But when the other end picked up, I couldn't say anything. And worse, I could hear someone breathing on my end of the line. Calm, slow, rhythmic, like the sound echoing through the tunnel. Like the sound I heard before I found the first version of me. I dropped the phone, and I didn't pick it back up. This morning, I found a second figure, standing in my backyard, facing the trees. Its features were almost perfect. Hairline thinning slightly, same uneven jaw, same scar on the knuckle. But its eyes were open, and they looked relieved, like someone who had finally returned somewhere they were supposed to be. I didn't panic, didn't scream. I just opened the sliding glass door, stepped outside barefoot, and stood beside it. We didn't speak, but I could feel it breathing next to me, matching my rhythm. Or maybe I was matching its. I don't feel lost anymore. I feel placed, held, like a shard returning to the sculpture it broke from. At night, when I lie in bed, I dream not of running, not of breaking free, but of soil, of pressure, of weight and warmth and patience. The clay doesn't chase, it waits. It waits until you're tired of being so fractured. And then it shapes you into something that belongs. I checked my hands a moment ago. There's still red dust beneath the nails. But when I touched it this time, it didn't feel like contamination. It felt like home. I used to think the tunnels were empty, but now I understand. They're full of people who stopped running, full of voices that chose stillness, full of selves that finally found a shape that made sense. And I think tomorrow, I'll go back, not to map, not to escape, but to settle, to step into the earth and breathe. Story 3. Whispers of the Unseen. The Faceless Man and the Rosary of Bone. It was 3:17 a.m. the first time I saw him. I hadn't been sleeping well. Something about the stillness in this place made my skin itch. No phones, no clocks, no internet. Just old wooden floors that creaked in strange rhythms and a schedule that ran on silence and bells. The retreat house had once been a monastery. Now, it served men like me. Overworked, overstimulated, spiritually dislocated. People who didn't know how to breathe anymore. The room they gave me was plain. Iron-framed bed, thin mattress, crucifix above the door. 12 other men in the same room, all sleeping like they'd been poured into their bunks and left to settle. Except me. That night I lay awake with the weight of my own heartbeat, keeping time. And then I heard it. Click, click, click. At first, I thought it was someone pacing the hall, maybe a monk on their way to matins. But the sound didn't echo right. It wasn't from above or below. It was in the room. I rolled over. And that's when I saw him, perched halfway up the stairs of the bunk bed opposite mine. Was a figure, motionless except for his hands. He was sitting backwards on the steps, knees folded at unnatural angles, one shoulder higher than the other. His back was to me, and he was holding a rosary. Click, 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 each bead rolled slowly between his fingers, catching moonlight like polished glass. But when they dropped, they didn't bounce, they shattered. Tiny white fragments skittered across the floorboards like brittle bone. I tried to sit up, but my body didn't cooperate. It wasn't paralysis, not in the medical sense. It was something quieter, a hush that had pressed itself against my chest and whispered, "Don't move." He's not finished. His face, or what should have been his face, was smooth, not hidden, not masked, gone. Just skin, flat featureless skin where eyes and mouth should have been. And yet I knew he was looking at me. I could feel it in my teeth. He raised the rosary, slowly. It was almost bare now. Only a few beads left strung on a cord that looked far too organic, like it had grown rather than been tied. One by one, he let them fall. Click, crack, shatter, until only a single bead remained. He held it out toward me, his head tilted, inviting, not commanding, not threatening, just waiting. And then, like fog lifting from a mirror, the silence broke. "Matthew?" Brother Francis, his voice came from the hallway. The figure froze. The bead, the last bead, trembled between his fingers. Then, in one fluid motion, he folded backward down the steps and vanished beneath the bunk like a shadow slipping through a crack in the floor. I scrambled out of bed just as Brother Francis entered with a flashlight. My breath came in gasps. My shirt was damp. I could still hear the clicking in the walls. We checked the bunk. Nothing, except on the stair where the figure had been sitting, we found fragments. White, porous, curved slightly, like chips of something once living, and lying between them was a rosary made of polished bone, 58 beads, one missing. Some prayers, I think, are never meant to be finished. Some rosaries should stay broken. I didn't tell anyone the full truth. Brother Francis asked if I'd had a nightmare. I nodded. That was easier than trying to explain the man with no face and the rosary that cracked like bone china on the floor. He told me to pray. "Offer it up," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Everything that visits us in silence, God already knows." But it didn't feel like God that had visited me. That day I walked the garden path until my feet went numb. I thumbed my own rosary so hard my fingers blistered. I stayed silent through Vespers, and still, when the hour came again, 3:17 a.m., I woke. No sound this time, no clicking, just a pressure. The kind of pressure you feel when someone's kneeling beside your bed, watching you breathe. I opened my eyes. He was back. Not on the stairs this time, closer. squatting in the space between my bunk and the next, knees splayed, spine curved like a question mark, holding the rosary in both hands. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was longer. New beads had appeared. I counted, almost without meaning to. 57, and now 58, still missing one, still holding it between two fingers. He didn't offer it this time. He just twisted the cord slowly, like winding a noose, and tilted his head. Waiting. Always waiting. I tried to speak. I wanted to say no. I wanted to pray, but the words caught in my throat, thick and dry. My mouth tasted like old ash and iron. I blinked, and he was gone again. The next morning, there was a thin ring of dust around my bunk. White-gray, like crushed limestone or cremated ash. When I stepped into the hall, I noticed something else. Every wall niche that had once held a crucifix or saint's icon, empty, clean, as if they'd never been there. And when I asked Brother Dominic, the retreat's quiet groundskeeper, if anything had been moved, he looked at me for a long moment before saying, "Nothing leaves here unless it's carried." On the third night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my rosary tight in one hand, a flashlight in the other. At 3:16, I started to feel it. The pressure, the knowing, like the air had bent slightly in one direction. The room seemed deeper than usual. Darker too, like the shadows had become hollow. And then he emerged, from under the bunk this time. He didn't crawl or stand, he just rose, like smoke coalescing into foam. His face was the same, featureless, skin pulled flat over nothing. But his posture had changed. Straight, more certain. He held the rosary out in both hands now, arms extended toward me. 59 beads, just one short. I felt my hand twitch, as if something in me wanted to complete it, needed to, as if that last bead was mine. That's when the hallway door creaked. Brother Francis stepped in, holding a candle. He didn't shout. He didn't gasp. He just walked up beside me, laid a hand on my wrist and whispered, "Not yet." The figure receded, melted, and this time it left something behind. Where it had been crouching, there were fragments again, but not random, a shape, carefully arranged, a kneeling man, head bowed, hands cupped, like someone mid-confession. I'm afraid I know what that last bead is. I think he's been carving it out of me, piece by piece. And soon, when I've been emptied enough, he'll place it where it belongs, and the prayer will be finished. I stopped going to morning prayer. I told myself I was sick, but the truth was, I was afraid I'd forget the words, because each time I tried to recite the familiar psalms, they came out wrong. Not scrambled, not forgotten, just empty, like mouthing a language I no longer understood, like the voice behind them wasn't mine anymore. Brother Francis left a small note outside my door that day. He comes to the silent, the ones who no longer resist their own erasure. No signature, just his name in faint graphite on the back, scribbled like an afterthought. Matthew, not brother, not mister, just my name. The one I hadn't spoken aloud in days, the one that was starting to feel borrowed. That night, I didn't fight sleep. I lay down early. I left the lamp on. I kept the door unlocked, and I waited. 3:17 a.m. He was already there, sitting at the edge of my bed. Not crouched, not crawling, just seated, like someone waiting for a train. Calm, timeless. The rosary was full now, 60 beads, complete. The final one, the one I'd refused to accept, was in place. But there was something wrong about it. It looked fresh, wet, red, not white. It pulsed faintly with every heartbeat. Mine. It was mine. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally mine. And when I leaned forward, unable to stop myself, I saw what had changed. The face. He had one now. Not fully formed, not detailed, but the suggestion of eyes, the soft indent of lips. It was like watching clay being pressed from the inside, and I recognized it, not from a mirror, but from photos, from childhood, from memories that had lost color. It was me, younger, hollow, waiting to be filled. I whispered or tried to. "Who are you?" But what came out wasn't my voice. It was flat, echoed, like breath forced through dry leaves, and his head tilted, mirroring mine. That's when I knew. He wasn't here to steal my identity. He was my identity, or rather, what was left when I scraped everything else away. The burnout, the guilt, the decades of pretending to believe, the fatigue of being needed but never held, the silence that grew, not from peace but from emptiness. He was made from every part of me I had refused to mourn. And the rosary? It wasn't made of bone. It was made of confessions, carved bead by bead. Each one an omission, a moment I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Each one a step towards surrender. I reached for it. I don't remember meaning to, but my hand rose anyway. And when I touched the final bead, something happened. I felt myself pour outward. Not die, just thin, like water slipping through cloth. And he breathed in. Slow, satisfied, complete. But before I could fall forward, before I could lose whatever last piece of myself was still mine, a voice cut through the air. "He is not yours. Brother Francis." This time he wasn't gentle. He held a candle in one hand and a crucifix in the other. And for a split second, the flame bent violently to one side, as if reacting to something in the room that had mass. The figure shuddered, not in fear, in disappointment, and vanished. Not slowly, not theatrically, just gone, like a switch had been flipped, on the floor at my feet. Dust, a single fragment of red. The last bead, broken in two. He didn't need to finish the rosary. He just needed me to believe it was mine. Because once I accepted it, I would have been the one handing it to the next man who woke up at 3:17. And that's how he survives. Not by taking us, but by becoming what we give away. Our silence, our exhaustion, our name. I left the retreat 2 days early. Brother Francis didn't stop me. He simply nodded, handed me a plain envelope, and said, "If the silence returns, speak to someone. Not to God, to a human being." I never opened the envelope. I don't think I want to know what it says. Back in the city, everything felt too loud. The traffic, the blinking lights, the buzz of conversations I wasn't part of. And yet, the noise never reached inside. That space, where something once stirred, once longed, once prayed, was still quiet, not peaceful, just cleaned out, as if someone had scooped out the parts of me that used to echo back when I asked myself who I was. I tried going back to work. I answered emails. I smiled at clients. I even went to Mass. But when they passed the rosary during prayer, I couldn't hold it. My fingers wouldn't close. Not out of fear, out of recognition, because the beads felt warm. Familiar, like something I'd held once, long ago, before it shattered in my hand. Some nights I still wake at 3:17, no sound, no figure. Just the sense of absence sitting at the edge of my bed. A space carved out, waiting. Like a hole in the world that only fits one shape. Mine. I keep the broken bead in a drawer beside my bed. It's just a fragment now. Smooth, red, nothing remarkable. But sometimes, when I hold it, I forget my own name for a moment. And when I remember it again, it never sounds quite right. We don't lose ourselves all at once. We give away one piece at a time. One skipped prayer, one buried thought, one quiet nod when we should have screamed. And if we're not careful, someone or something will come to finish the rosary we started. And when that last bead falls, it won't sound like bone. It'll sound like surrender. Story 4. A glimpse into the unknown. The date of the fire. I didn't order the globe. It just appeared. One Tuesday morning, I came into my office. Coffee in one hand, laptop bag in the other. And there it was, sitting dead center on my desk, glowing faintly amber like a dying coal. A glass sphere, maybe the size of a grapefruit, perfectly smooth, warm to the touch. No seams, no base. Just there. I asked the receptionist if someone dropped off a package. She said no. Checked the building's front camera. Nothing. My name wasn't on any delivery log. But every time I looked away from it, I'd hear a faint crackling. Not like a faulty wire. More like something smoldering. I chalked it up to exhaustion. Left the globe on the shelf and went back to work. That night I dreamed of a cabin. It sat in the center of a cypress grove. The trees leaning like they were praying over it. The air smelled like heat before lightning. And though it was midnight dark, the cabin cast no shadows. Not on the ground, not on itself. I stood outside the open door, and I knew I was supposed to walk in. So I did. Inside, there were stacks of letters, each one addressed to no one, each one written in my handwriting. And every single one began with the same words. I'm sorry for what I'm going to do. I woke up choking on the smell of smoke. There was nothing burning in my apartment. No fire alarm. No cause. Just a faint orange glow coming from the corner of the room. The globe. It had moved. No longer on the shelf. Now sitting perfectly centered on my nightstand, pulsing like a heartbeat. I didn't sleep the next night. But it didn't matter. At 3:41 a.m., the globe lit up again, and I heard whispers, not loud, not distinct. Just there, like breath behind glass. November 15th, 11:47. A date, a time. I wrote it down. I wish I hadn't. At first I thought it was a warning, that I was being shown something, that maybe the letters were a cry for help. Some temporal anomaly, some psychic fluke. I read every letter I could find in the dream, trying to decode them. But they didn't speak of disaster. They didn't even plead for forgiveness. They sounded rehearsed, like instructions. And then came November 15th. I stayed home that night, doors locked, phone fully charged. At 11:47 p.m., I looked out my window. And that's when I saw the fire. Not in my building, not in my hands, just down the street. A 2-story house engulfed in orange, and standing at the edge of the road, backlit by the flames, accosted me. Was me, holding the globe, smiling. I didn't start the fire. I swear I didn't. But I didn't stop it either, because something deeper than will had already decided I belonged to the moment it happened. This wasn't prophecy. It wasn't possession. It was recruitment. The morning after the fire, I told myself I had imagined it. Until I checked the local news. 2 injured, suspected electrical short. No foul play. I zoomed in on the blurry photo they'd taken from across the street. And there, behind the police tape, barely visible in the window reflection, was a shape, someone standing, holding something round and glowing. I shut the laptop. I called in sick, but the damage was done. Because deep down I knew. The globe stayed quiet for a while after that. No pulses, no heat, no sound. But then the letters began appearing. Not in dreams this time, but in my apartment. Tucked between books, slipped into jacket pockets, stacked neatly on my kitchen table. Even though I lived alone, always the same stationery. Off-white, faintly scorched at the edges. Always the same words at the top. I'm sorry for what I'm going to do. Only now, they were dated. November 16th, November 17th, November 18th. Each one written before the events they described, and each one signed. In my own hand. Not forged, not copied. Mine. The instructions started small. Turn left at 9:12 a.m., even if it feels wrong. Drop your keys outside apartment 3B. Let the man in the grey hoodie borrow your lighter. I obeyed at first out of fear, then out of habit. And then I stopped questioning. Because every time I followed the note, something subtle changed. A dog barked and scared a toddler away from a speeding bike. A woman looked down just in time to miss the falling glass from an overhead window. A man's phone rang at a red light, keeping him stopped long enough to avoid a head-on crash. None of it made me a hero. It made me a cog. A necessary click in a watch I couldn't see the face of. Until the tone shifted, the letters grew colder. Ignore the crying in stairwell B. Leave the candle burning. Don't tell her the door is unlocked. I burned those notes the moment I read them, but the ash stayed, collected in the corners of the room, beneath my fingernails, on my sheets. And when I checked the news, there it was. Small fire injures one. Burglary leaves woman unconscious, no suspects. Child found wandering 2 floors below his apartment, unharmed. It didn't make sense. I disobeyed. And still, the outcomes matched what the letters had predicted. That's when I realized. They weren't instructions. They were records of what I had already decided to do. The globe reappeared in my bedroom the night of November 22nd. It was warm again, brighter, and as I touched it, I felt something I hadn't before. Not heat, not energy, but recognition, like a handshake, like a welcome. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the floor, globe in my lap, flipping through the newest letter. You are not possessed. You are not chosen. You are proving yourself. This is not prophecy. It is alignment. And at the bottom, December 1st, ignition confirmed. That was 8 days from now. I didn't know what was going to burn, but I knew where I'd be when it happened. I thought I was being shown the future. But the future wasn't the gift. It was the bait. I spent the next week trying to stop it. I threw out the globe, blocked all exits in my apartment, burned every new letter that appeared without reading them, slept during the day, stayed awake at night, tried to scramble whatever pattern had been laid out for me. But the whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew clearer. Not voices, not commands, just affirmations. Closer, aligned. Only one bead left on the fuse. Thank you. On November 28th, I visited the house that burned on the 15th. I'd avoided it before. Too afraid of what I might see, or worse, remember. But I needed to know. The lot was taped off. The siding half collapsed, windows blackened. But the structure still stood. A few neighbors were outside. Somber, suspicious. I stood across the street for nearly half an hour, trying not to look obvious. And that's when I saw it. My initials carved into the sidewalk in front of the property. Small, faint, dated October 2nd. 6 weeks before I ever found the globe. 6 weeks before I'd ever dreamed of the cabin. I stared at the letters like they might rearrange themselves into someone else's name. They didn't. Back home, I found a package on my doorstep. Unmarked, taped shut. Inside, the globe. Whole, uncracked, still warm. And beneath it, just one thing. A photo. Me, standing in front of the burning house. Only this time, it was from a different angle. It had been taken from inside the house. Through the flames. From the point of view of someone watching me smile. I fell to my knees. Not from guilt, but from the weight of a realization that slid into place like the final click of a combination lock. There was no future to stop. Everything I'd done, even the resistance, was part of it. The fear, the fight, the self-deception. It was all shaping me, sharpening me, preparing me for a single role, to walk into the next ignition site and do nothing. Because that's all it took. A forgotten door left unlocked, a lighter lent without thought, a phone call not made in time, a fuse not snuffed out, not by malice, but by hesitation. Recruitment wasn't about finding someone evil. It was about finding someone tired enough to go limp when fate placed the weight in their hands. That night I didn't sleep. I went back to the dream. Or maybe I woke into it. The cabin was waiting. This time the door was already open. The letters were gone, replaced by a mirror. And on the mirror, written in smoke, "You're ready. December 1st. The date in the final letter." I didn't hide this time. Didn't try to throw anything away. I dressed plainly, walked slowly, took the globe with me. It was warm now, not just in the hand, but in the chest, like it was synced to something beating deeper than my own heart. I didn't know the address, but my feet did. They moved through the city like they remembered where they were going before I did. Each step felt lighter, like the path had been swept clean, just for me. The house was old, unremarkable. Front yard unkempt, porch light flickering. A child's tricycle lay upside down, near the curb. The door was closed, but unlocked. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I just stood there, globe in hand, waiting. At 11:47 p.m., I turned and walked away. Never knocked, never lit anything, never said a word. Just stepped off the porch and back onto the sidewalk, slow and calm and certain. 20 seconds later, the sky behind me bloomed orange. No scream, no explosion, just heat, the kind that finds your spine and reminds you of every moment you failed to act. I didn't look back. The fire didn't ask me to. Later in the mirror, I noticed something. A mark, low on my neck. A soft, circular burn. The exact shape and size of the globe's base. Except, the globe never had a base. Did it? That night, a new letter appeared on my desk. Single sentence, typed this time. "You're no longer needed, but you're still welcome." I folded it, placed it in my coat pocket, and went to sleep. I still dream of the cabin sometimes. It's empty now, but I feel the pressure in the walls, like something waiting to be rebuilt. And I think that's the point. This isn't a cycle. It's a process. Refinement. Each flame peels away those who hesitate. Each fire finds the next candidate. And now, when I walk through the world, I see them. People with soft eyes and quiet shoulders. The kind of people who don't want to do harm, only to stop feeling responsible. Those are the ones the heat reaches first. This was never about fire. It was about willingness. And once you prove you're willing, even once, you don't need to strike the match again. You've already agreed to hold the box. Story 5. The Unseen World, Reflections and Possibilities. I've driven highways for almost 20 years. Graveyard routes, long hauls, back roads no GPS wants to admit exist. You see things out here. Wildlife, lightning crawling sideways across the sky, people standing just off the shoulder at 3 a.m. like they forgot where they came from. But nothing prepares you for when one of them knows your name. It was mile marker 207 on I-15. Empty stretch, no exits for the next 40 miles. Just me, the hum of the engine, and a thermos full of burnt coffee. The CB was dead quiet. No weather, no chatter, just static so soft I forgot it was even on. That's when I saw it. At first, just a shape in the fog. Man-sized. Still. Standing in the center divide like a mile marker that didn't belong. As I got closer, I realized it was a scarecrow. Sort of. But no straw, no hay, no sticks. It wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored, jacket still crisp despite the wind, and it didn't move. Not even as my headlights hit it full on. But its head, it turned. Slowly. And as I passed, I heard it. Clear as a whisper pressed against glass. Marcus? My name. Nobody else around for miles. I hit the brakes. Hard. Skidded slightly on the shoulder. Blinked. Looked in the mirror. But the median was empty. No figure. No suit. No face. Just black top. And fog. I didn't sleep when I got to the rest stop. I just sat in the cab, hands shaking slightly, waiting for the sun to come up and burn whatever was left in my brain. But when I opened the glove box to grab my logbook, something was inside that hadn't been there before. A suit, folded, perfectly pressed, still damp, still cold. And not just cold from the night, cold from something else. Like it had been submerged or buried. It was my size, my style. My name stitched into the collar, M. Holloway. That was 2 nights ago. Since then, I've seen them every time I drive, but only in mirrors. 3, 4, sometimes 5 of them. Figures in dark suits, pale faces blurred like long exposure photographs. They don't wave, they don't blink, they just watch. Always from the edge of the frame. Always still. And last night, I checked the rear view again, expecting the usual. But this time, it wasn't them I saw. It was me, smiling. Except I wasn't smiling. I wasn't even looking in the mirror, but he was. And I knew, in that second, without a single word spoken. I'd already been recruited. Some men get job offers in envelopes. Some get phone calls. Me? I got a suit. And a reflection that stopped being mine. I didn't put the suit on. Not the first night. But I didn't throw it out either. I told myself, I kept it as evidence. Maybe part of me still believed I could explain this logically. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe sleep deprivation. Hell, maybe a breakdown. But the longer I stared at that folded fabric on the passenger seat, the more it felt like waiting. Not forgotten, not placed, presented. I tried ignoring the mirrors after that, covered the rear view with duct tape, switched off the side cams, taped a photo of my old dog over the sun visor so I'd stop catching glimpses of the windshield at night. But it didn't help, because they were everywhere. Gas station windows, stainless steel bathroom fixtures, sunglasses, puddles. Even my shadow started looking off. It didn't lag. It didn't mimic. It watched. Day 4, I started hearing things. Not voices, not words, just the sound of buttons being fastened, one by one. Software precise. Snap, snap, snap. Then a tie being adjusted. Fingers sliding down a jacket's lapel. And finally, the faint shift of polished shoes on asphalt. but always behind me. Never when I turned, only when I looked in the mirror. On day 5, something changed. I stopped seeing them. The men in suits, the watchers, the recruiters, or whatever they were. Instead, I saw myself. Dozens of me, in suits, walking in formation behind my rig like mourners at a silent funeral. Some younger, some older, some with scars I don't remember getting. Some with expressions I've never worn. All of them wearing my face, but none of them looking at me. They were looking forward. I finally put the suit on. I don't remember making the decision. I woke up at a rest stop somewhere in Kansas. Engine cold, windshield fogged, and the suit was on me. Perfect fit, no wrinkles, no smell. Like it hadn't been worn, or had been worn by someone exactly like me. The tag still read M. Holloway. And when I looked in the bathroom mirror, my reflection didn't match my posture. I turned left. It turned right. I smiled nervously. It smirked. And then, while I stood frozen, it raised a finger and pressed it against the glass, like it was tracing the edge, not of the mirror, of a door. Since then, I've been seeing signs, literal ones, billboards with no logos, just blank white with 3 words. We see potential graffiti on a train car. Welcome, Marcus. A diner menu that briefly glitched, replaced every item name with the phrase, approval pending. Even the GPS spoke out loud yesterday, though I had the sound off. Recalibrating for induction. Please continue. I told myself I could stop. Just toss the suit, quit the job. Go off-grid, but I didn't. Because something deeper, older than fear had started to settle in my spine. Anticipation. Like a muscle memory I didn't know I had. As if I wasn't being taken. I was being returned. Whatever they are, they don't abduct. They don't hunt. They don't force. They watch. And when you watch them back long enough, they help you find your place. On the 7th day, I saw it clearly. Not a flicker, not a glimpse, a full direct encounter. I had just finished refueling at a silent truck stop in Nebraska. The station was empty. No staff, no music, no lights except the motion sensor that flicked on as I approached the restroom. Inside, every surface reflected. The walls, the sink, even the floor. Not polished chrome, but a dark obsidian sheen, like oil with memory. And that's where I saw him. Me, but not mirroring me. Not anymore. He was standing slightly to the left of center, hands behind his back, posture perfect. Same face, same suit. But his eyes were different, sharper. As if he'd been doing this longer than me. As if he was the original, and I, the echo. He spoke, not aloud, not with sound, but with the movement of his face. His lips mouthed 3 words. You're almost ready. I stepped closer. He didn't flinch, didn't mimic, just nodded and reached forward. His fingertips brushed the inside of the glass, and mine, involuntarily, rose to meet them. There was no chill, no resistance, only pressure, like pressing into warm wax. I couldn't pull away. Behind him, in that world of reflection, stood rows of others. Not all were me. Some looked like other truckers I'd passed on the road. Some wore hospital scrubs, business suits, janitor uniforms, airport staff vests. All of them still. All of them, watching their own reflections as if waiting for permission, or a signal, or an order. I asked, not with my voice, but in my mind, what are we? And my reflection answered, what remains when resistance becomes structure? What endures after identity is reassembled around function? We are mirrors that learn to step forward. I stumbled back, but the weight didn't lift. The pressure followed me into the hallway, into my cab, into the glass of my instrument panel. And now, for the first time, I understood what they were recruiting for. Not obedience, not belief, but alignment. The system didn't care about right or wrong. It cared about symmetry, about making sure that when a window was looked through, a window looked back, and eventually stepped through. I looked into the rearview mirror that night. The duct tape had peeled off. My own face stared back, but only mostly mine. The hair was neater, the jaw more confident, the gaze rehearsed. And when I blinked, he didn't. He smiled. And somewhere in the dark behind my cab, I heard dozens of shoes take a synchronized step forward. They were never trying to replace me. They were showing me the version of me they wanted me to become. And I was almost there. I started polishing my mirrors. Not compulsively, ritually. Windex, microfiber, steady circles, every morning before I start the engine. Like I'm tending an altar. Because that's what they are now. Not glass, not tools, but windows into where I'm going, where I've already been, where they wait. I no longer cover the rear view. In fact, I keep a small light clipped just above it, soft amber glow. So even at night, I can always see what's behind me. Not what I'm leaving, but what's following. And more often, who I'm becoming. Sometimes when I'm driving just before dawn, the reflection moves before I do. Adjusts the collar, tilts the head, prepares. I don't resist anymore, because I've realized something. This isn't invasion, it's instruction. I've started receiving envelopes now. No address, just left on the dash after I refuel. Inside, schedules, routes I didn't bid for, places I've never been. Always precise, always correct. And when I follow them, things align. I pass someone at the exact moment they look up and see me. I arrive at a diner where the radio is already playing a song I dreamed of the night before. I park beside a truck that has the same dent, the same rust, the same CB call number as mine, and a driver who looks up and nods as if we're already acquainted. And when I glance at the glass of the coffee pot behind the counter, I see us both, facing forward, same tie, same hands, same smile. I no longer ask where this leads. That question was meant for people with destinations. I have none, only assignments. I drive, I reflect, I exist as needed. And mirrors, they guide me. Last week, I passed a rest stop and saw a young driver pulled over on the shoulder, hands shaking, eyes red, empty cab. I didn't stop. I just checked the mirror. And there, in the side view, I saw him staring back at me. Behind him, faint and flickering like bad reception, were 4 men in suits, watching, not moving, just waiting. I nodded, and the figure in the mirror, my reflection, nodded back, not to him, to me. You don't join them. You become recognizable to them. And once you're seen clearly enough, you reflect what they need to be seen next. That's the work. That's the purpose. That's the unseen world. In these 5 true encounters, what stands out isn't what was seen, but what was felt. A bottle swinging like a metronome behind your car at 80 miles per hour. A clay version of yourself that breathes when you stop believing in your own voice. A faceless man patiently assembling a rosary of bone and waiting for your guilt to finish it. A fire that was never meant to be prevented, only followed through. And a mirror that doesn't reflect but recruits. Across back roads, mine shafts, silent monasteries, forgotten groves, and endless highways, the common thread isn't horror. It's recognition. a sense of being watched, of being measured, of being chosen, even before you knew there was a choice. These stories weren't warnings, they were invitations. A glimpse into the moment before something takes your place or reveals that it already has. Because once the veil is pulled back, once you see the eyes in the dark, once you hear your own name spoken by something that shouldn't know it, you don't walk away unchanged. Some stories end, but some just keep walking behind you, waiting for you to slow down, waiting for you to turn around, waiting for you to see. Welcome to Scroll and Shock, where every scroll sends chills down your spine. From true stories to eerie urban legends, we bring you scary stories to fall asleep to. If you dare, dim the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready to scroll and shock.